feedback like that with people saying, "Oh, but everybody's there in merit," and you're going, right, how does that work then? If it's 60% male and 40% women, what are you saying? Well, the problem is the women don't put themselves forward. You say, well, why is it you think that women aren't putting yourself forward? Why is your party, your branch, not really asking itself questions if women aren't putting themselves forward? What are the attitudes and the cultures in your branch of your political party that mean women aren't putting themselves forward? So there's a lot of questions to be asked about that, and some people are very, very resistant to the idea that there should be a balance at all, that a balance is necessary, or that anything should be done to try and achieve the balance. Surprising resistance. I think Nicola did us a real favour by being so upfront, straightforward about it. She is pro-woman, she is a feminist. She doesn't want her niece, that wonderful passage in her speech about not wanting her niece to grow up realising there even ever was a glass ceiling. I think Nicola was very brave and to the point, more than I think we expected her to be on the feminist agenda. So that was fabulous. That was really, really great when Nicola made those changes.
How do you think she's been doing?
Oh, wow, I'm a Nicola fan. I think she's doing extraordinarily well, but I am a Nicola fan. I actually have known Nicola since she was that teenager you see in the old photos with the stern haircut and the spiky hair. And I think to have watched Nicola mature into a stateswoman, a woman of power, a woman of influence, but a woman who does it with grace and elegance, without perhaps the sarcasm and the jokes that perhaps our predecessor had. And yeah, I am absolutely overwhelmed with how well she's doing. I think she's doing fabulous, but I am a fan. I am a fan to start with. She's also my constituency MSP, so I'm very happy with Nicola.
So going on the Rifkin stories at the moment, is it you I have to pay in order to get access to the First Minister?
I don't know what Nicola would charge women for Indy for access, but I don't think it would be too much. I feel really sorry for Malcolm Rifkin. In my distant past, I was an SNP activist. I'm talking 20 years ago, and I actually stood against Malcolm Rifkin in Pentlands in 1992. And he was a terrifically nice guy. I really liked him. He was clever, he was intelligent, he was polite, he was charming. I think it's really sad that because I think this might end his career, and it will end his career in, under a shadow instead of him going into the Lords. And I do think that's quite sad, because I think there's worse rogues in Parliament than Malcolm Rifkin. I don't know what was going through his head. And he was coming out with all this stuff about, people like me should be able to have a standard of living, whatever. You're like, Malcolm, why? It's really sad, I think. But yeah, I think he's done for himself. I do.
It shows part of the point of why the independence campaign is so strong, and has in certain senses got even stronger. The fact that Westminster now just seems so far removed. I mean, all of the problems that the Yes campaign brought up are still there to be seen.
I think so. I think that was an argument during the Yes campaign that perhaps wasn't front and centre, because we were so busy defending the vision of an independent Scotland that we maybe went on the attack about the system we were trying to break. The revolution would be breaking that old Westminster tie, that elite, that privilege, that entitlement that people seem to breathe in with the air in Westminster. And it's not just this recent scandal, this cash for access scandal. There's the whole question of sexual abuse being covered up at the highest level, which we haven't got to the bottom of yet. We don't quite know what went on. And, with the death of Lee in Britain, suddenly people were saying things that were shocking to me. Now, we don't know if they're true. They've never been properly investigated, explored, reported on. But you certainly get a picture of a place where the sense of privilege and entitlement is so far beyond the lives of everyday, ordinary people. It's toxic, it's corrupt, it's, maybe when we have a second referendum, instead of trying to defend what an independent Scotland would be like, we could point more and say, this is what we have to break up. This is what is wrong with the country. And not just Scotland, this is what is wrong with the whole UK.
Yeah, it was a point I tried to make a number of times, but I mean, someone tweeted, you mentioned the whole UK, someone had a brilliant tweet the other day where they were saying, the Parliament, brackets, being investigated for a paedophile ring, has handed a document on that Labour Council, brackets, being investigated for a paedophile ring, to the BBC, brackets, being investigated for a paedophile ring. It's remarkable how sort of hand in glove the whole thing is.
It is, and it's children and women that are usually the victims. Young people, children, women, seems to be young men, boys basically, not young men, who seem to have been victimised as well in this. And that just speaks to the kind of entitlement and privilege that's everything that's wrong with Westminster, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I tweeted just before we come on, there's a picture, put the politicians on minimum wage and see how fast things change.
I don't think you want them at minimum wage necessarily. Maybe you do. Maybe we need a few pre-marked politicians. Maybe that is an idea. I think politicians should be paid a reasonable wage. But what is it they get now? £67,000 in the House of Commons? That's a lot. I've always said if I could personally earn £50,000 a year, which I don't, but if I could ever find a job that made me £50,000 a year, I would have more money than I knew what to do with. There would be nothing I couldn't afford on a salary like that. So I find it really hard to understand how someone who's been paid £60,000 or £70,000 a year thinks that isn't enough to live on. I mean, it just seems to me a really good salary.
Particularly when they don't actually have to pay any of their expenses for living, for eating, for heating, for anything. So it's not really that's their salary. That's probably what they have in their pocket after all their bills have been paid.
Do you know, I would be on holiday every weekend. I would never be off a plane, but don't tell the Green Party. But if I was on a salary like that, I mean, it's enough money to do anything that any reasonable person could want to do. And there is an element that greed seems to sink in the more people get, isn't there?
Absolutely. One of the things since the independence referendum, just to go back to it a bit, because you talked about Women for Indies membership has increased, the Commonweal are doing something now. What do you think about the surge in itself where everyone, or not everyone, but so many people have decided to join a party, which in a certain way reinforces a traditional politics, but in the way that it happened, it doesn't, because there's all these other groups involved and people are kind of doing it in a certain sense to make a point. I don't know. What did you feel about the surge? I don't think anyone really expected it.
No. We didn't expect the surge at Women for India, and I don't think the SNP did either. I was at the Nicola Sturgeon gig, as I believe we call it, in the Hydro. And I mean, I couldn't stop laughing the whole time. I'm like, this is the SNP, and they're firing glitter cannons at people. It was just something I'd never expected to see in my life. Remembering that when I was an SNP activist, when the SNP did well, we were at 15%. It's like, we thought that was good. So for me, it's really hard to sit and watch, the glitter cannon and think, gosh, I remember sitting in the SNP club in Edinburgh having a drink and going, hooray, we got to 15%, But I think there's something important about the surge that we need to keep in mind. The strength of the Yes campaign, part of the strength of the Yes campaign was the alliance, the disparate groups coming together in a common goal. We need to keep those disparate groups, and we need to recognise that while we all have the common goal of independence, we don't all have the same goals on everything. So there's a certain trend within some of the Yes people that's like, if you're not SNP, that's the only way to go. It has to be the SNP because, winning the election is the only way to do it. And we fundamentally disagree about that. There's some people who seem to want Women for Independence to be the 52% of the 45%. And we don't necessarily speak for all women who voted yes. We are a group that is pro-women. We're quite feminist. We don't have men at our meetings. And a lot of people are, why can't men come to Women for Independence meetings? And you're like, well, go and read about privilege a little and maybe think about that and wonder why that is. But, we've a particular voice. The radical indies, they've got a particular and a very specific voice. They're coming from a position of the left, far to the left of the SNP. And the idea that they should give up their political views and we should all jump into the SNP and any disagreement is disallowed. We must all think with one mind and speak with one voice. I don't think that does a service to the different elements that made up the Yes campaign. So I very much argue that Women for India is different from the SNP. We're not the women part of the SNP. The SNP has its own women's arm. we are Women for Indy with a distinctive voice and a distinctive agenda. We can't be what everybody wants us to be. We can't be all things to all people, and we won't try to be all things to all people. There's room for a lot of different voices. And I think we need to remember that and not get bogged down in this idea that, unity is all. And if you dare to speak out or contradict or speak against, somehow you're a traitor to the Yes movement or something. And there's a wee bit of that goes on sometimes that I find uncomfortable.
I can't say I've seen that so much, to be honest, but maybe...
You should run the Women for Indy Twitter account for a night then.
Okay. well, it wouldn't be allowed. So, so with the election coming up, I'm sure you've seen all this stuff recently about, if you're voting for someone, you're getting someone else. So, who are you voting for in the hope of getting, if you vote Labour, you get UKIP. If you vote Tory, you get Labour. If you vote, I don't know what it is anymore. No one seems to know.
I'm voting SNP. I voted SNP the first time I was old enough to vote, and I've never been inclined to change my mind yet.
So are you voting for SNP in the hope of getting SNP, or voting SNP in the hope of getting UKIP, or what? I don't understand.
I'm voting SNP out of badness. It was why I started voting SNP and why I'll keep voting SNP. I'm voting SNP because I'm a revolutionary, and they've always been the most revolutionary party in the UK because they want to dismantle the UK. No, I'm voting SNP. But, that's fine. Lots of people in the Yes movement are voting for other parties. Some are even voting Labour. God help them. But not many. But it's important that we recognise that I'm voting SNP and hoping to get SNP. I don't know what we'll get. We'll probably get SNP, I would think. We'll probably get a lot of SNP MPs anyway. But for the scenarios post-election, I don't think anyone can call it. It seems a very strange time politically because perhaps we're finally seeing the start of the breakdown of the old two-party pendulum system. I know the Liberals claim that they've broken it. Every election there's, we're the third party. Maybe this is the time we genuinely will start to see a pluralism among political parties, and that's got to be healthy for democracy.
I'm going towards the opinion that we could actually see Labour and Tory in a kind of coalition.
Do you think? I mean, really? I don't know.
Not in an official coalition, but we'll all just vote the right way when it comes to crunch time.
I know that Labour people get very upset when you say this, but I don't see that. A huge distinction between Labour and Tory, and I know they're trying to find one and put the clear blue water there. But in all the big important issues, nuclear weapons, austerity, they're pretty much singing from the same hymn sheet.
Oh, agreed.
The hymn sheet, the differences are so minor that, a party like Plaid Cymru really seems like an outlier. And really, Plaid Cymru is a very moderate democratic party, but there's just so little difference between Labour and the Tories now. And I know that's a cliche, and everyone says, you can't say that. But I can't see what the defining issue is. I really can't. I think something Ed Miliband wants to do something about heating bills, but that's not a great, fundamental difference that we can all get on the barricades about, is it? I genuinely can't see what the main distinctions are anymore.
One of the things that's been quite amazing to see recently is when New Labour came along, when Blair came along, there were a few Tories that defected straight to Labour, and that was shocking enough in itself. But this time round, it's been not more than one. There's been a few Labour people who've defected directly to UKIP, and that sort of tells you something about where the ideological stance of the Labour Party is at the moment.
I can't fathom someone who joined the Labour Party and went straight to UKIP, except if you understand it in terms of Labour being, just the dominant force. In a city like Glasgow up until recently, since 1955 or whatever, they weighed the low Labour vote. That there was some seats in Glasgow where the Labour vote at Westminster was 70% in favour of Labour. In those situations, I suppose, if you want to be involved in politics, you join the Labour Party not out of ideology, but because it's the machine that's there. It's the party that's in your community, in your neighbourhood, running your council. Maybe so people joined not out of ideology, but because it was there, and then found they were more UKIP. It's a hard one to understand. I can't really get my head around that one. But, it'll happen, and it'll happen to the SNP. There'll be someone in the SNP will defect to UKIP or defect to one of the fascists. But, It happens to political parties, but it does seem a very strange political journey.
So where do you think this political journey, since you mentioned it, is going to end up? With the prospects for independence, there's